Hey, what's going on everybody? It's ETAPRIME back here again. Today we're going to be taking a look at the all-new Retroid Pocket Flip, and this is definitely one that I've been waiting for. Ever since it was announced, I've been super excited about this because my favorite handheld form factor is the Nintendo DS. I love a clamshell design, and with this, we're getting really close, but as a lot of you already know, we've only got a single screen here, which is totally fine with me because it's actually a beautiful 4.7-inch IPS. Retroid is offering a few different color variants, but the one we have here is the watermelon version, so it's kind of a clear red. I personally think it looks good. And in real life, it's a lot brighter than it looks in pictures, so if you check out their website, just note that it is a bit brighter than it's looking on screen. So first things first here, the main thing I was worried about when this was announced were the analog sticks. I'm not a huge fan of rocker-style analog sticks, but then we found out that these are Hall-based rocker-style analog sticks, and after getting it in my hand, and using them for a little while, they're actually pretty good. They're a lot better than I thought they'd be. Now, I would prefer real analog sticks over rocker style every single day, but since we're working with kind of a clamshell design, it needed to be nice and thin there so the screen could fold over. These are great, and I'm glad that they went with high quality rockers here. And another thing I really wanted to take a look at was the D-pad. From what they've shown so far, we actually weren't sure how far this would be recessed inside of the unit. And as you can see, we've got a little bit of height to this D-pad, so we don't have to worry about missing our moves or anything like that in fighting games or platformers. And we will be testing this out by the end of the video. And by the way, these are clickable, so we've got L3 and R3 here with these rockers, which was really cool to see. The action buttons over here are double color injection molded, so we don't have to worry about paint rubbing off because there's no paint here. What we're seeing here for the A, B, X, and Y is actually plastic, so it's not going to rub off. Now taking an overall look at the unit, over here on the right hand side we've got our volume rocker. Moving around to the front, we've got a power button and a 3.5mm headphone jack, so we don't have to rely on the built-in speakers, but I will tell you they do sound pretty good. It's using dual stereo speakers. Over here on the left-hand side, we've got a micro SD compartment, and this will support FAT32 or NTFS right out of the box. And when we move around back, you'll see that we have a micro HDMI port, so we can connect this to a larger display, and USB Type-C for charging the 5000 mAh battery. And taking a look at the bottom, you see we have some ventilation here, and this is actually functional because there is a built-in fan. This is going to allow us to keep those sustained clocks on the CPU, and it's controllable from Android. There are a few different profiles that we can choose from. One main thing that I think was missing from the Retroid Pocket 3 and 3 Plus is present here with the Flip, because we've actually got analog triggers around the back here. So it does make it really easy to play your favorite racing games. They're linear or analog, whatever you want to call them. And finally, we've got an extra M1 and an M2 button. We can program this inside of Android, so we've got extra functionality here just in case a game requires those extra buttons. And when it comes to the specs of the new Retroid Pocket Flip, for the CPU, we've got the Unisoc T618. This is the same CPU that was used in the Retroid 3 Plus, so we can expect the same performance, but sustained performance because we've got that built-in cooler. This CPU has 2 Cortex A75 cores running at 2 GHz and 6 A55 cores running at 2 GHz. And when it comes to the GPU, we've got the Mali G52 MC2 at 850 MHz, 4 GB of LPDDR4X RAM, 128 GB of internal eMMC 5.1 storage, plus we've got micro SD card support. A 4.7-inch 60Hz IPS display with a resolution of 1334 by 750, and it can get up to 450 nits of brightness. 5000 mAh battery, and this is running Android 11. Setup on these units is super easy. Once you boot it up, you're going to get your setup wizard. This is going to allow us to change the time zone, we can connect to Wi-Fi, and enable Google Play services. So we do have full access to Google Play if you want it. And I'll tell you, right out of the box, this is a pretty clean version of Android 11, aside from the fan control and their Retroid launcher that they do have built in. You can opt to use that. But we also have the option to install a bunch of emulators during the setup process, and a few of these are optimized for this chipset. You can totally opt out of this if you want to, but there's 30 here. I'm just going to install all of them. And the final option here is our launcher. We can just use the Retroid launcher or the AOSP launcher. I'm going to go with AOSP so it looks like Android, and we can swap over to that Retroid launcher at any time. I've been messing around with this for a little while now. It's very snappy. We've tested out the T618 in the past, and with this, since we've got that fan built in, we do have fan control from the drop-down menu, 3 profiles to choose from, And I will tell you, in performance mode, it does have a little bit of a whine to it. So if you're in a quiet room, you can definitely hear it. But if you're playing a game and you've got the speakers going, you won't notice the fan. It's not super loud, but it's got a bit of a whine when everything else is nice and silent. Overall, I am loving the form factor here. I think it's kind of the perfect size. If you've got much larger hands, it might be a bit cramped for you. But overall, most people should be very comfortable with the form factor here. And of course, I wanted to give you a look at this thing compared to the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, because that's the one that a lot of people have right now. Again, they're using the same chip, and you're going to see very similar performance. But in the long run, with this built-in cooler, we can get that same performance for much longer, just sustained performance, because we're able to cool that CPU down. And when you look at the Flip, they took a lot of cues from the DS and the 3DS, and this thing does fit right at home in my little collection here. I am missing one right now because I'm reshelling it, but I've got the DSi XL 2DS, the original DS, which is kind of a hoss, and I've also got a DSi here. As you can see, it definitely fits right in. Jumping right into a little bit of testing, we're going to start off here with some native Android gaming. And first on the list, we've got Minecraft. Definitely easier to run, and right now I didn't have to change any of the settings. I do have the FPS up in the top left-hand corner. I believe this is set at 12 chunks, and you can see we're dipping under 60, but taking those chunks down just a little bit will allow you to play this at a constant 60. But if I didn't have that frame counter on, I really wouldn't even be able to tell the difference. Minecraft does play very nicely on this handheld. Next up, we've got carX Drift Racing, and the big reason I wanted to boot this one up was just to show you those analog triggers are working. Personally, my use case scenario for linear triggers like this are racing games, and as you can see, you can give it just a little bit of gas, and we've got that linear input. Same thing with the brake, and a lot of the newer racing games on Android do support this, but it comes in really handy for streaming games with something like Moonlight or Steamlight. And the final native Android game I want to take a look at is Call of Duty Mobile. And with this one, the controller isn't detected by the game because it only uses first-party controllers. But luckily, we've got a built-in mapper. So we can use the built-in controls here with basically any game. We'll just need to map them to on-screen touch points. And Call of Duty Mobile runs at 60. Up in the top left-hand corner, I've got the Retroid's built-in frame counter. We're at 60, and yeah, I'm just getting used to these rocker-style analog sticks. But they work out great, and I'll tell you, this does seem to be kind of updated, at least their built-in mapper, because it's a lot easier to aim with this one than it was with the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. So a lot of people do pick these up specifically for emulation, and you can always use whatever front end you want. As long as it's compatible with Android, it's going to run on this device. But Retroid has their own emulation front end built in. It's actually really simple to use. And I'm running all of my stuff from a micro SD card. Right now in my N64 section, no games are listed. But I've put all of my games in the default location, and the Retroid front end will create that folder for you, either on internal or external. Now I can just scan that. It's going to populate my games and automatically download the box art. Moving over to my Game Boy Color section, I've put a bunch of games in here, and I've already scanned that directory. But as I scroll down, you'll see that not all of the artwork is downloaded just yet. I kind of have to hover over it, and it'll scrape it on the fly. If we take a look in here, you'll see we've got a lot of supported systems, but it doesn't mean that it's going to run every single game flawlessly. This will run some easier to emulate PS2, 3DS, and Gamecube games, but you don't specifically buy this for those higher end systems. But keep in mind, there are a few games that run pretty well. Since the Flip has taken a lot of cues from the DS, I figured we'd go ahead and test this out first. I'm using the Drastic emulator, and all the buttons were mapped for me. We've got more than enough power for DS emulation, especially using the Drastic emulator. This emulator basically runs on everything, and my L3 and R3 buttons with these rockers here were actually mapped to kind of swap the screens out. So we can go large, we can go double screen, and swap them while we're in single mode. Dreamcast is another one that's going to run really well on this hardware. I'm using the Redream emulator, and while we're here, I figured we'd go ahead and test this D-pad out. It actually has some really nice rotation to pull these special moves off, but in my own opinion, I personally prefer a tighter D-pad. I'm not saying that this thing's wobbly or anything like that. It definitely works. I just wish it was a bit tighter. But yeah, I can definitely pull these off, no problem at all. Moving over to some PSP emulation, I'm using the standalone version of PPSSPP. With the really hard games to emulate, like the God of War series, we've got Chains of Olympus here. I'm at 1x resolution, but I don't have any hacks on, and I'm using the Vulkan backend. This is running at 60 FPS, and if we can run this at 1x, then the easier to emulate stuff can definitely go up to 3, and some of them even 4x resolution. Now, like I mentioned, you don't run out and pick this up specifically for Gamecube and PS2, but I definitely wanted to show you that some games do run pretty decently. We've got Time Splitters 2, Vulkan backend, and I'm at 0.5x resolution. We're using the Dolphin for handheld emulator that you can download during the setup. This is a highly modified version that allows us to kind of take the resolution way down. And a lot of the easier to emulate games will run better with this on the Retroid Pocket Flip, but then when you move over to something like Mario Kart, I prefer using the official version of Dolphin with all of the new fixes and everything like that. And with this one, we're using the OpenGL backend. But as you can see, we do get some dips every once in a while, especially when new effects appear on screen. And of course, I wanted to show off some PS2 emulation using Aether SX2. We've got Kingdom Hearts 2 here at 0.5x resolution. So we're not quite at native resolution. This is an easier one to emulate. Games like Gradius and Crash Bandicoot are going to run really well, but trying to run something like Gran Turismo 4, even with a ton of hacks on, just really isn't possible on the Unisoc T618. Now, I could probably get this game to run a little better if I spent some more time tweaking the settings, but we're not going to get 60 out of Gran Turismo 4 or God of War. First impressions here, I personally love the design. I think they knocked it out of the park with this thing, but I am very partial to the clamshell design, and I understand that some people out there just don't like these. And if that's the case, there are other handhelds on the market, like the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, and you're going to get the same kind of performance, but we do have some upgrades here. Like the built-in cooling system, we've got those linear triggers, and some people may consider it an upgrade, given that we have Hall-based rockers here. But personally, I would rather have the old analog sticks versus any rocker every day of the week. But I do have to say that I was more than impressed with what they've done here with these. They feel much better than I ever thought they would, but personally I am running into one issue with them. And I think it comes down to user error, just not being used to using these rockers. But whenever I'm playing a dual analog stick based game on this, I keep mashing the L3 and R3 button. So I do need to kind of get used to using these. It takes a little bit of pressure to get to that L3 and R3 button to click in on these rockers, and I just keep hitting it. But yeah, this fits right in with the clamshell family. I think they've done a bang-up job here, and I will have another video coming up. I just wanted to kind of do a first look here. I've got a lot more that I want to test with it, and if there's anything else you want to see with this, just let me know in the comments below. Over on the Retroid website, they do have several color options to choose from, so if you're not into this, what they're calling watermelon, then you could go with something like a white version or even a black version. But yeah, I really do like this thing, and I will have a couple more videos coming, so stay tuned to the channel. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. Like always, thanks for watching.